Hello and welcome back to the Wandering Cantos. Today we're going to continue our series on the Quintessential Quintuplets, and we're going to be specifically looking at part 2 of volume 4. So if you haven't seen my previous video on volume 4 part 1, I'd recommend you check it out now since we're going to be sort of building off of that discussion. Also, if you like this type of content and want to be notified when the next episode is released, please consider subscribing to the channel. We've also been doing these literary study series on other mangas like Chainsaw Man and Rent a Girlfriend. So there's a lot of cool content, and I've been working on some future stuff, and I'm really excited about what we're going to be posting in the future, so I'd recommend subscribing. If you're new here, however, to explain it briefly, the purpose of this video is to treat this manga the same way you would treat a literary classic in a high school or college English class. So basically, that means we're going to take a look at the plot of each chapter, do a little character analysis, and then study things like theme. As always, though, I want to take a brief moment to acknowledge that this episode will include spoilers for volumes 1 through 4. We won't spoil anything from the future volumes, however, so we also won't be including spoilers from the TV show. Also, since it's a busy time of the semester, this video is going to be focusing specifically on chapters 27 through 29. So let's start off with a super quick recap. In the first part of Volume 4, Futaro and the Quints traveled to their camp and stayed overnight at an inn where they had to share a room. Itsuki saw Ichika near Futaro while he slept, but she couldn't tell which Quint it was, so she doesn't know that it's Ichika. Once they arrived at camp, Futaro and Yotsuba spent a lot of time together working on the test of courage. And while doing this, Futaro and Nino ended up getting separated from everyone else, but Nino didn't recognize Futaro and basically thought he was this attractive bad boy. And if that doesn't make sense, I recommend you check out the episode on part 1 of Volume 4. Also, we sort of ended on a cliffhanger where Miku may or may not be confronting Ichika about her feelings for Futaro. So, Chapter 27. Chapter 27 picks up with Miku confronting Ichika. Miku struggles to communicate her feelings, but Ichika understands her sister and asks if she wants to switch places for the bonfire dance. Miku still feels conflicted about the Quint's philosophy of keeping everything equal, but Ichika tells her to make the decision that she won't regret. Meanwhile, Nino is glowing about her potential date with the mysterious Kintaro. Futaro tries to tell Nino the truth about this, but isn't able to find the right opportunity. Later, Futaro helps Yotsuba with moving logs for the bonfire dance. Yotsuba is upset that Futaro left her alone at the test of courage the previous night, but Yotsuba then runs off and gets distracted by one of the other helpers, and Ichika steps in to help Futaro. While they're doing this, Ichika gives Futaro some advice on how to get on the good side of the different Quints. He needs to be strong enough to match Nino and gentle with Itsuki. Ichika also tells him to be gentle with her. Ichika avoids telling Futaro about how to get on Miku's side, which is sort of notable because I think that's sort of motivated by, jealousy and sort of a competitiveness. Futaro, in response, tries to figure out how to handle the whole dance situation and decides that it would be easier to ask Ichika to call it quits because then he could still keep Nino happy. Unfortunately, this greatly upsets Ichika. Futaro is thrown off by Ichika's emotional reaction to his rejection, but before they can talk about it, a group of students come nearby, so they hide. Futaro tries to be gentle following her advice and gives her his jacket so Ichika can hide her tears and sort of not be seen by the other students. Meanwhile, as they hide, Yotsuba and some others lock Futaro and Ichika in the shack. And that brings us to chapter 28. So, for a while, the conversation between Futaro and Ichika is pretty much non-existent, despite Ichika's attempts. Futaro, however, takes interest when Ichika mentions that she might quit school. Essentially, her acting career is successful enough and busy enough that she might pause her school career to be able to focus on acting. Futaro surprises Ichika by being pretty supportive of this decision, although he does lament that his pay might go down. To change the subject, Ichika suggests that they dance in private in the shack since they won't be able to dance at the bonfire. So Ichika assumed that Futaro didn't want to dance with her because he was either 1, embarrassed to dance, or 2, didn't like her in that way. However, it's also revealed that Ichika didn't know about the bonfire legend, which basically says, whoever dances with each other at this bonfire are going to be bound together forever. So she immediately asks Futaro if Miku knows about the bonfire legend, and she seems horrified to have found out that Miku knows about this, and so this whole time Miku had this extra context. But before she can really express this, a log almost falls on her. Futaro swoops in and saves her, which makes her heart flutter. The smoke detector then begins to go off, and sprinklers douse the two in water. Futaro and Ichika panic because they're afraid that they're going to get caught by a security guard. Before this can happen, however, Itsuki and Miku open the door, catching the two of them red-handed. So, we then flash forward to the next morning. It is now the final day of the trip. Futaro and Ichika got in a lot of trouble with the teachers, and they were barely able to explain themselves to Itsuki and Miku. Futaro wants to clear things up, but he's also just exhausted. And while he's trying to get some extra sleep, Yotsuba encourages him to go skiing with her. Futaro isn't super into it, but he goes along with it. He finds out that Ichika is sick, Itsuki is looking after Ichika, and Nino is skiing elsewhere. Miku joins Futaro and Yotsuba. Yotsuba enthusiastically teaches Futaro to ski, and as they do so, they bump into Ichika. Ichika suggests that they all play tag, with Yotsuba being it. Futaro crashes while trying to run away and ends up bumping into Nino. She sees the band-aid that she gave Kintaro and tries to approach him, but Futaro runs away. So Futaro ends up hiding in the same igloo as Miku. When he tries to leave, she pulls him closer and asks him to stay. Miku comes up with a good strategy to compensate for Yotsuba's athletic ability. Futaro, however, says he doesn't want to neutralize that effort, and states that the Quints shouldn't be treated equally, they should be treated fairly. This resonates with Miku's current crisis around needing to be equal and to equally share Futaro, so she seems pleased by this. Futaro then steps out to get fresh air, and Miku calls Ichika, which concludes chapter 29 and the plot of this, part 2. So, to jump into our analysis, I want to discuss relationship dynamics. So, while daily life with the Quints seemed to be somewhat chaotic in general, since they all have such unique and sort of strong personalities, it is interesting seeing just how much crazier things can get without the daily structure of school plus the study group. Usually, there's a clear dynamic where Futaro is basically the leader and the Quints essentially look up to him, whether they like it or not. Without this tutoring dynamic, however, Futaro is more or less equal to the rest of the Quints, if not lower than them. I feel like, in a way, Futaro usually uses his tutor role as a way to avoid awkward conversations. So, for example, I doubt he would have gotten into this whole Kintaro situation with Nino had they not been on this trip. So, if it had been a normal day and she had approached him thinking that he was Kintaro, he'd probably just, talk over her and sort of override her and tell her to focus on studying. Without that power dynamic, however, he's much more out of control. Something else I want to discuss is the idea of independence. So, now that the Quints are older and getting interested in things like romance, they're being forced to face sort of an awkward part of growing up that they haven't had to face before. In order to pursue things like careers, romance, and special interests, they need to become independent since the other quints either 1. Won't share the same interests, or 2. Can't share the same person. So Futuro sort of serves as the agent for this change since several of the quints are now interested in him. Miku seems to be struggling with this the most since she was always told that things need to be equal. In chapter 29, however, she has a revelation based on what Futuro said. Things don't have to be equal, they just have to be fair. As a side note, while their mother was probably well-intentioned with the whole equal thing, it was sort of a misguided, choice in my opinion. The quints have been told to, share everything, including successes and failures, happiness and sadness, etc. But if one quint accomplishes something, it doesn't seem right that she would have to share that accomplishment with her sisters. That's just a recipe for resentment. Furthermore, if one sister is sad, it seems weird that the other quints should be brought down to that level of sadness. I mean, this is kind of the point of the current emotional crisis on a meta level, but it still seems worth mentioning. I just don't really see how that could have ever gone well. If Miku decided to get really into marathon running and ran a marathon and was really proud of that, it seems weird that she would basically have to effectively congratulate her sisters on also doing that. It doesn't really actually play out that way, but I think you can see what I'm saying. And then for the final bit of analysis, I want to sort of just focus on Ichika. So Ichika is such an interesting character because she is a quint, a quintuplet, and therefore isn't really the older sister. I mean, she's older by X amount of time, but it's not like she's several years older than the other sisters. Usually this sort of self-sacrifice only makes sense if an older sister is truly older, since, with age there comes strength and self-reliance. It makes me wonder how she got this way, considering that her mom was so insistent on the sisters being treated equally. Ichika's sort of self-sacrifice is very contradictory to that equal dynamic. I mean, Ichika seems to always think that she doesn't deserve to be treated equally and that she needs to make sacrifices for her sisters. This sentiment is also clearly genuine based on her reaction to hearing about the bonfire dance. Wanting to dance with Futuro was sort of the one time she, wanted to be selfish and choose herself over her sisters. But when she realized the full extent of what she was asking for, she was horrified since she thought she was just asking for just a dance without this extra legend and extra context. And then to sort of check in with the sort of ongoing question of who is the bride, here are our notes. So Ichika seems to be falling more and more in love with Futuro. And while that's happening, I still feel like Miku is currently making the most sense narratively. If anything, Ichika feels like she's becoming a rival to Miku that Miku has to overcome. Plot is defined by conflict, where your hero has an objective, but conflict is the obstacles in the way, keeping the hero from getting that. And that's sort of in that way, Ichika's almost becoming an antagonist to Miku. So I'm curious to see how Miku's phone call with Ichika is going to go. And small moments like Miku and Futuro being snuggled up in the igloo feel meaningful, and they kind of feel like the kind of thing that the characters would later look back on as sort of the origin story of their romance. Especially since when they're together alone in this intimate, situation of being super close in this igloo. These are the moments when the characters sort of have major revelations, which will directly impact the way romance is played out, especially with the dynamic of the quints. So Nino, meanwhile, is more interested in Kintaro, but I do wonder how she's going to feel when she eventually realizes it's Futuro. I feel like she's either going to be really, really mad and forever swear off Futuro, or maybe she'll consider Futuro in a new light, since if she's attracted to Kintaro, she kind of has to be attracted to Futuro. Itsuki still has main character energy with the whole Pride and Prejudicing and all the stuff we've been discussing in previous episodes. However, it does feel like right now she's super far behind Ichika and Miku. Yotsuba, meanwhile, seems to be, maybe making a move in her own way. She's so determined on spending time specifically with Futaro that she's basically ignoring her sisters, which feels like a big deal considering how close they all are. But with that, I'm going to wrap up this little discussion on part 2 of volume 4. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and don't forget to subscribe. And then, as always, I like to give some questions for the comments, since one of my favorite parts is actually discussing this volume with you in the comments. So, do you think Futaro is going to dance with Miku or Nino or Ichika? I'm curious about how you think he's going to basically pull this off, since he effectively has to dance with 3 girls at the same time. Do you think Ichika is really going to leave school? I'm going to miss her presence at the study groups if she does, so part of me thinks she's not going to, because I don't really know what that would do by, suddenly making it that she basically has no time to interact with Futaro. And who are you cheering on to be the bride as of this point in the story? I do ask that you don't spoil anything if you know who the bride is from reading ahead or watching the anime, but if you're reading along with me, I'm curious to hear about who you think the bride might be. But that being said, I'm going to wrap this one up, so take care, and I will see you in the next one.